Right, good evening. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the third Galloway Footsteps event, focusing on inside the home. So we've been looking at different elements of carbon reduction activity, how you can reduce your carbon footprint. We started with what you can buy. We then looked at what you can eat. We're now looking at inside the home. And then next month is our last one of these series of events, which is looking at outside the home and a range of other activities that can take place. The more astute amongst you will notice that I am not Helen Kerran. So apologies, first of all, from Helen Kerran. I'm trying to deputise in her absence, and it'll be Helen leading the last one as well. But we're trying to show that we can do this in Helen's absence, and I'm sure it'll go well. Many thanks. We've got a couple of three really good speakers tonight to try and give us some focus and inspiration as we continue on this journey of carbon reduction. What we're going to do tonight, I'm going to do a little review of welcome and introductions. I'm going to do a little overview of the Geeky website, just in case some of you might not have had a chance to have the see Geeky. I'll do it very quickly though, because I'm conscious a good quorum of you are on the Geeky website and are actually signed up in Team Galloway, which is what we've set up as well. And then we'll go over to our expert speakers from Home Energy Scotland. We've got Mario and Siobhan talking to us from Home Energy Scotland, the changes we can make around the house to reduce our carbon footprint, and sometimes also reducing costs as well, which is a nice sort of side feature of that. We'll take any questions and answers, and then delighted to have Jenna Keynes from the Galloway Southern Ayrshire UNESCO Biosphere giving us a little snapshot of what she's found from the Geeky website and hints and tips from a biosphere perspective. And then I'll give a wee snapshot on how Team Galloway is doing. So if you haven't already signed up on Team Galloway, I'll touch upon this in a moment, how you can join Team Galloway and how the principle here is small identifiable actions that you can make to your personal lives, which actually start to aggregate into a tangible difference of carbon reduction from across Galloway. We're calling it Galloway Footsteps event, but obviously it's welcome to everybody and anyone's able to take part. It's just Galloway's the principal background of what we're working with. A little word just about myself. My name is McNab Laurie. I'm working on the Galloway Glens project. The Galloway Footsteps is a spin-off or sort of initiative from the Galloway Glens project. If you haven't heard about the Galloway Glens scheme, then you're really missing out. There are Amazon tribes people in Brazil who are untouched by Western civilization, who I think have probably heard of the Galloway Glens scheme now. So we're trying really hard to get the word out there about connecting people to our heritage, supporting sustainable communities and boosting the local economy. And so you can see this Galloway Footsteps fits quite nicely into there. Have a look at our website. And while we try and do everything that's Galloway focused, it's trying to be open to all and trying to really put Galloway on the map. So we're on the old social media as well, so keep an eye out for us there from Galloway Glens scheme point of view. I just want to do a quick word about Geeky Zero. So some of you already signed up with this. Geeky Zero is this online step-by-step guide, a calculator that allows you to calculate your current carbon footprint and then identify changes that you can make that will reduce your carbon footprint. So it sort of sets targets. It's very like almost Weight Watchers for carbon in a way. It tries to encourage you to make little changes, and this is what other people are doing, and wouldn't that be good there? And it rates it. It gives you a score as your geeky score. And so what we're doing with people who signed up on Team Galloway, it gives everyone a geeky score and then it aggregates that into a Team Galloway score. So you can see how many across the team, the changes that we've made and reductions that have hit and things. So it's all about step-by-step guide to reducing your carbon footprints, and it tries to make them very small. You'll see some of these suggested changes. Things like keep your lid on when you're boiling pounds of water and things like that. These are very small micro changes that you can make, and they've tried to quantify the carbon footprint benefits from it. So yes, there are some big things in here, and I know Home Energy Scotland are going to be talking about broader things like how you heat your house, insulation in your house, and the big ticket items. But Geeky's also trying to focus on very local, very small individual actions that you can take. So Geeky stands for Get Informed, Know Your Impact, and founded in 2017 as a social enterprise. So we're hoping to have someone from Geeky attending next month's event, looking back at what we've learned and what we've achieved as Team Galloway as well. So do have a look through the website when you get a chance. There's some awful, I have to put some awful stats in now. I think these have been in the last two meetings as well, but there's a ecological emergency as well as a climate emergency that are coming together at the moment. So some of the geeky points try to pick up on number of plastic items that are being used, but really it's building on this carbon, how much carbon is being emitted a year and how can the actions that we make reduce carbon being emitted. And so that ties into the biodiversity crisis, and we've got other things there like deforestation. So at the next month's talk, we're going to have a speaker from the Borders Forest Trust who's talking to us about tree planting, how to best plant a tree, what to increase the chances of success of a tree that you plant. And so that could give a nice little angle on that, hopefully. So we have this decade for action, and there's a depressing stat here. Is this is the global emissions increasing over time and where we need to be in the next 10 years. So you can see we're heading the wrong way at the moment. And what Geeky's trying to do is to try and arrest that and try and steer us towards a lower output. And a lot of this is large organizations, large statutory bodies, councils, governments, and things like that. But I think we're trying to be the flip side to that. We're trying to say, what is the personal element to this? And so what the Geeky website is quite good at is trying to focus it back on the personal elements and how we can all make a difference. So today to 2030, you can see we need to make a significant reduction there. And so that is really involving taking your UK average carbon footprint of 9 tons and cutting that to 2.5 tons by 2030. So you can see a significant reduction. And that's going to be, that's everything across transport through to how we live, how we keep our houses and things. So we need to, where we can, we need to harness these simple quick win steps to set us on that journey. So if you have a chance to have a look at the website, there's quite a good demo function. I had a bit of a play. In fact, I've got a little bit obsessed with it in the last couple of days because some of the points seem outrageously simple when you see them. Only boil the water you need. It's quite good for starting discussions at home, I find this, because if you find your partner boiling more water than is necessary, it's a handy opportunity to raise this as a point that could be addressed, and it builds all to the domestic bliss that we live in. So we've got items right the way through, from the large items like installing heat pumps down to turning lights off when you don't need them. So some of this we know, it's just a question of trying to quantify it and trying to give us a wee nudge to make us better at it. And then you log in as yourself, and then you've got Team Galloway as well there. So I tried to do this without actually showing my own score, but you'll see my score is actually lower than the average for Team Galloway. So you could argue that I'm technically a drag on the ticket at the moment, but what I'm trying to do is refine that as weeks go by, and I'll try and get myself back up to the average score. So, yes, so at the end, after our 2 speakers tonight, what I'm hoping to do is give a wee snapshot of how Team Galloway is doing now. We've got some nice headline statistics of everyone in Team Galloway is committed to this, and these are the changes that have made so far. So it's quite good to see your individual actions actually feeding into the whole. So what I'd like to do now, I'll stop sharing the screen, and then I'd like to hand over to our presenters from Home Energy Scotland. Particular thanks to Mario and Siobhan for helping us out tonight. I understand there's a football match of some description on somewhere, so I'm very grateful for making time in their schedules to come and talk to us. And if I stop sharing here, Mario, I'm hoping you will be able to.
You can let me know if that's came up okay. Yep, perfect.
Brilliant. The floor is yours. Thank you so much, Mario. I'll field any questions through the chat, and then I can put them to you once you're finished. Probably
no problem. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Mario, and I'm from Home Energy Scotland. So I'm a household renewables advisor for Home Energy Scotland. And just a quick background on Home Energy Scotland. First off, you might have already spoke to us, or you might know about it already, but for those that don't. So we're funded by the Scottish Government, and our purpose is there to provide free, impartial and clear local advice. We've got centres all around Scotland. We've got 5 offices, and your local one's based in Ayr, but we cover all the Ayrshires and Dumfries and Galloway. So we offer advice and support for energy efficiency, sustainable transport, water and waste. Part of my job in particular, we offer free home renewable visits to customers, which we've only just started doing again after a year. And we can help you provide support to access funding from the Scottish Government to help implement measures that you maybe would be looking to do. So what I'll cover tonight will be just a wee bit about how you can reduce your own CO2 emissions in the home. Looking then a bit more at, as we was saying, the kind of bigger things you can do, in particular insulation for traditionally built properties, which is mostly all of Dumfries and Galloway, and then the renewable technologies that you can include in that as well. And then I'll end up with some updates about the funding as well, and what you can utilise there as well for you. So moving on to start off there. So just on ways that you can reduce your CO2 emissions in your own property. So there's lots of different ways you can do that, and what's the benefits to yourself there. You'd be asking for that. So it does protect your home from heat loss is the first one there. So simple things like insulating a hot water cylinder that you've got, which isn't too costly to do. That saves you about £20 a year on your bills, but it also saves you about 150 kilograms a year on CO2 emissions. So small things like that, again, that you can do in your property will lower your carbon footprint, but it also has a benefit to your own self with your fuel bills as well. So that brings for that. I mean, your property loses heat on lots of different ways in terms of external surfaces like your roof, your walls, your windows, your doors, even your floors and some ventilation as well. Ventilation is one where usually that one can't be helped because you need some to let the properties breathe, but all the other ones, like in particular your walls and your roof spaces, they are things that you can do to stop that, to help reduce your carbon footprint, and which will save you money on your fuel bills as well. So starting off with how to go about things. So it tends to be quite common that you would always look at a fabric first approach there. So the way I like to describe that is almost think of in particular insulation that you're wrapping a jacket around your house, like you would do for yourself if you're feeling cold. That's the way sometimes I like to look at it. So and most traditional built properties don't have cavities, so you're looking at solid wall insulation. So solid wall insulation can come in two separate forms. You've got either external solid walls or internal insulation. External insulation, if you've got a kind of more traditional build like a granite, windstone or a sandstone type, it's not necessarily something you'd probably want to do in terms of the outside of the property and keeping with that. So a lot of the time you would want to look back to more of your internal wall insulation. Internal wall insulation is more to do with you would be the gaps between your plasterboard and your existing walls there, where you can incorporate insulation into there. And again, that the walls is your biggest area of heat loss in a property. So if you can insulate your walls, it's always good to do. If you've got a solid brick type of property where the outside of the property is maybe, say it's already rough casted or it's not aesthetically as damaging to do to the property for you, you can do external wall insulation, which is your external cladding. So that can be cladding on the outside of your property, which is then re-rendered, and again that works just as well as your internal insulation. So in terms of those two types of insulation, they both work. There's not one that works better than the other in terms of to keep the heat in the property, but it's all down to maybe the property itself and yourselves there in terms of, for example, like I was saying there, if it's granite or windstone, you wouldn't want to cover that up. So that's where maybe doing internally is better. This, again, solid wall insulation will help reduce your carbon footprint. You're talking anything from 425 kilograms to over 1,500 kilograms a year, bringing down those carbon emissions again in the property. And it can have savings up to £350 a year in your fuel bills because all that heat is being retained. In particular with insulation, that people might have concerns about likes of dampness or moisture content being retained in the property. That's where it's always important to get a right installer for it. In particular, insulation, for example, in between the plasterboard and your walls, you still want to leave a small air gap to let moisture get through. Insulation should be permeable, which just basically means that moisture that's collected in a property can escape through the insulation and then through your walls. So it's all down to, I would say, getting a right accredited installer to be able to do the work for you professionally so that you can overcome those issues. But that's the first biggest area of your property for heat loss that you could insulate, and that will reduce your carbon footprint and your fuel bills, and it will keep you warmer. So I'll move on now to your second biggest area of heat loss in a property, which is your loft insulation. Now, in particular, in traditionally built properties, sometimes the loft space isn't always as accessible as a more modern property. Again, there's the kind of more obvious way of doing it. If you can access it, you've got just the kind of your roles there that you can kind of do yourself. There's other ways to insulate your loft space if it is quite hard to access. For example, you can get blown insulation into the property. So that will help you get into any awkward spaces, so you can still get insulation into your roof space, even though you maybe or you or an installer can't access it the more conventional way. You can still get it blown in. And again, that can be done by, they might use mineral wool fibre, treated cellulose, or some other sort of insulation. But certainly it's still possible to do in a more traditionally built property. The technology, again, certain organisations like Historic Environment Scotland, which I'm sure a lot of you will be aware of as well, in the Dumfries and Galloway area, are very good in terms of coming up with new ideas and ways to insulate traditionally built properties. So certainly, again, it's still possible to do in your kind of smaller, your smaller areas for you. The other part of the roof where it can usually be done, in particular in traditionally built properties, is in the roof space. You've actually got your rooms. This, again, I would say that is more definitely not a DIY job for yourself. That would more definitely be in the case for a installer to do that. There's a lot more involved in that, because you've obviously got your walls, your gable ends. You want to make sure it's all insulated before you do that. So when you are doing your, say you're doing a conversion in particular, you want to get all that done firsthand. You could retrofit it but again, you would need to strip back everything to be able to get into that. But again, all these methods of insulation would benefit anybody, even if it's not a traditionally built property. But certainly, these are the kind of measures that you could be looking at to do to help bring your carbon footprint down, save you some money, and also it will definitely keep your home warmer. And particularly in your roof spaces, the heat does rise, so getting any form of insulation that you can into a roof or a loft space is always going to benefit your property. So it's very well worthwhile to do. In terms of rooms and roofs, you also want to make sure you insulate all the areas, which will be like the walls and the ceiling round any of the dormer windows. Because you are in the roof space, you will find it colder if it's not insulated properly. So you'd want to insulate all the walls, just like you would do if it's like, almost think of your gable end part as like just a continuation of your internal walls downstairs that you would insulate in a traditional built property. So what I'll do now is I'll move on. So you've got your property all well insulated now. So what I'll do now is I'll move on to renewable energy. So renewable energy can be from various different sources, but they're all generated from natural resources, whether that's the sun, the wind, water. It's all those sources are naturally replenished, which is why they're renewable sources. Biomass is one where some people might think it's not necessarily a renewable technology, but if you're doing it in a sustainable way, where you're replanting for any trees that come from that you use for biomass, it's still a sustainable renewable technology. And again, in terms of carbon emissions, I think we'll touch on that in biomass later anyway, but you do, of course, burn carbon when you're doing that, but the carbon that the tree puts out in its lifetime, that will all be put back out. So it's almost like a zero total anyway. So biomass is still, even though you're burning wood, it still is a renewable technology. And they're a lot more versatile now as the kind of technologies progress and move on. So in terms of what renewable technologies you would want to put in your property, it's all down to what motivates yourselves there. So what you're wanting from your renewable technologies, whether that's you're wanting to save money on your fuel bills, whether it's to be greener and reduce the impact on the environment, or again, you've maybe got an older system and you just want a greater warmth for a comfort level in your property. In some cases, some technologies can generate some income as well. So if that's important to you, of getting a technology in that can be greener, reduce your bills, but also gives you something back for what you've paid to maybe put in, then some technologies can do that as well. And there's plenty of available resources as well, in particular in Scotland. You've got wind, you've got sun for solar, hydro's one, water you could do as well. So that can be something else you maybe just want to use as many available resources that are completely renewable as possible. There is, of course, barriers to renewable technologies, and hopefully this is where we can kind of help you overcome a lot of these barriers. In particular, high install costs just now. Renewable technologies are still more expensive, I would say, than your more conventional systems like gas and oil. Again, this is where hopefully, which I'll go on to discuss further later on, about the different funding options that we offer on behalf of the Scottish Government. So that can hopefully alleviate some of those barriers in terms of which technologies, the scepticism in some of the technologies. Again, that's where the likes of myself and my colleague Kevin are able to provide you a lot more in-depth, tailored specialist advice to yourselves, whether that's either coming out to see the property, to kind of speak to you face to face, have a look at it and see what is best for you and the property. So that help and support is there. Again, the same with the lack of awareness on the savings you would make. That's all things that we can help you out with. And then the last couple of ones, the complexity of the financial support. Again, that's an area that Home Energy Scotland is well versed in and is able to help you with also. So these are all things that we can hopefully provide to people so that these barriers start to come down, and it helps you have a smooth journey and be able to kind of put these renewable technologies into your property. And then the last one about finding a good installer and the disruption to your property. Yes, there might be some disruption to your property, but that's where it's all about finding a good installer, where they kind of understand that and they can alleviate as much as they can, try not to make it as too much of an impact to your property. And again, later on, I'll touch on how to find a good installer or an accredited installer. We'll go over all that further on there. In terms of installers, though, it's a micro-generation certification scheme installer, and that's also necessary when you're applying for funding. And at the end of the presentation, there's some handy web links as well, and that you can find all this information as well on. So I'll move on to the different types of technologies. I'll touch on each of them just briefly to give you a kind of overview on each one. There's two different categories, if you like. So we've got electricity production and heat production. So the likes of your solar panels, your photovoltaics, your wind turbines and your hydro turbines, they'll all provide your property with electricity. And then you have the likes of biomass, solar water heating and heat pumps, where they all provide heat for the property. The first one we'll touch on here is your solar photovoltaics. So these are probably the most common ones that you've either already got or most people will think of doing or have already in their property. Again, solar PV gives you that option to capture the sun's energy and convert that into electricity. Again, during the daylight hours, you'll be generating electricity. So it's not just about you need a really sunny day. It just works on daylight. So I know in Scotland in particular, if it was only when it's a clear sky and a sunny day, you might not necessarily always, you might not get the full use of them in that case. But no, you can, even on cloudy days, you can still generate your own electricity. And then at night time, you would be using your mains electricity. A way around that though is you could potentially install battery storage, where any electricity you don't use during the day, you can charge up a battery to use at night time, which totally brings down your reliance on the grid completely. And that again will alleviate your carbon impact as well there. With that, it's good to, if you do have PV, it's good to maybe start looking at how you run the property then and changing your behaviours, because if you're generating this free electricity during the day, you maybe don't want to be doing lots of ironing and washing at night time if you can. If you're not, and say if you're in the property most of the day, you don't want to be washing and ironing and using those kind of appliances at night time when you're not generating any electricity. So that's when maybe change your behaviour slightly, maybe in the morning, if possible, start doing things like that. And it means that you can get the full use out of your panels. And then at night time, you're not using as much electricity as you would normally. It's maybe just for your kind of things you can't get around to doing. Even things like if you've got an electric shower, for example, you could have a shower when it's still light, potentially if it's quite early on, like on the summer nights, for example, there. So the last thing I'll say in terms of installing them is they are permitted developments, so you are able to do it without planning permission. But again, you can check with your local authority if there is any constrictions, if you are maybe in a conservation or listed building. But they are permitted developments in Scotland, so you should be able to put in PV without any planning consents. Wind turbines are very, again, so what they will do is they'll generate electricity, obviously, with your wind. They are usually only suitable for properties with extensive land. Again, the kind of size that you would need to be able to implement that into your garden or your land you've got, they can be quite large. I would say the diameter of the blades can be anything from 6 feet to 21 feet potentially per blade. So it is quite a large turbine you would be putting into your garden there, so, or the land you've got. So they're not tend to be done on a domestic side too commonly. But again, you can do it if you've got quite a lot of land, and it's got, the important part for that is there's nothing around you, because you want that wind to be free flowing so you can get as much as you can. You don't want anything blocking that, which is known as turbulence, and that's where you won't get as much from them as you can there. And again, like your PV, it is completely renewable as well, and it's green. And the stronger the wind is, so if you're in a really windy location, the more electricity you will produce. And again, hydro is one that's done on, I would say, quite a larger scale, tends to be domestically there as well. Again, if you've got extensive land, you might have a river kind of at the back of your land, you might be suitable for a hydro turbine. They can reduce your electricity from the grid that you use, but again, they're very site specific, so it's best to discuss that with a hydro specialist to see if you're suitable. But because it's in the water, so for example, you've got a river maybe in the kind of your back garden, that part of that land is yours. That water source up and down of it belongs to other people as well. You've got other agencies like the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency who would want to be consulted on that. So hydro turbines on a domestic scale maybe aren't as common, but on a larger scale, they are a good way to generate electricity also. And I'll move on to now about a wee bit more about your renewable heat. So that will be ones that you can get heat from. And biomass is one where you can get it either in a boiler form or like a log kind of stove boiler as well. Biomass, again, is how that's done is by burning plant matter, whether that's wood chips or pellets. What I would say with that is these work well in properties that can't be well insulated. So again, in traditional build properties, because biomass gives quite a high energy output, it works very, in terms of the heat you would get from that would work very similar to a gas or an oil boiler. They are best suited for those kind of properties where like a heat pump, for example, wouldn't work because it wouldn't give out enough heat for, say, a large stone property that you can't insulate at all. A biomass system might be suitable. The most important thing and challenging thing that can come from biomass, however, is the fuel supply. So you do need a reliable source of fuel and the right quality. You don't want to have a poor quality of wood supply, whether it's pellets or chips. because you want it to be dried as well. You need storage space.
So what you do is you push your
So you'll want to be able to do that as well there. So, and I touched on this at the start there about when the wood is burned. Yes, that does produce carbon dioxide, but with that, when if that plant's sourced from a reliable source, that tree that's being cut down, if it's replanted, that again, it's a sustainable way of doing it. The carbon dioxide that's put out, the tree, for example, if it's a tree that's been cut down, that tree has absorbed all that carbon dioxide during its lifetime, and it's putting it back out when you burn it. So it's almost going to a zero figure there, if you like, from you burning it, because that tree's already taking in that carbon dioxide, and then you're just putting it back in there. So biomass, although it does produce carbon dioxide, it is still seen as a carbon kind of neutral, if you like. That's the word to look for. It certainly is carbon neutral. Solar water heating is a heat source. So that one there is very similar almost to your panels, except it uses the sun's heat to heat. As you can see, there are some tubes that would be on your roof space. Again, what that allows that can be connected to the likes of a hot water cylinder. So that uses the solar thermal systems to use the sun's rays, and that's to heat domestic hot water. Again, a immersion heater can be connected to that, and you can use the panels to, the tubes there to heat your hot water. It doesn't tend to work with combination boilers because you do need a hot water cylinder. So if you do have quite a modern, say, oil or LPG kind of combi boiler, you would need to kind of retrofit it to you would maybe need to change to a more conventional boiler. Solar thermal does work quite well with heat pumps, which I'll just be moving on to briefly there. But because you've got a hot water cylinder with heat pumps also, that solar hot water can be connected to that so that you are working off of them. On average, we do estimate about 50% of your hot water needs could come from solar thermal, depending on your usage. And again, that's a great way to save money and reduce your carbon footprint as well. Because certainly 50% of your hot water is all completely renewable and free for you to use. It certainly is saving you money, and it's saving carbon emissions as well. My last technology that I'll go on to discuss for you is heat pumps. So the heat pumps tend to be, at the moment, are some of the most relevant, most popular heat things that are happening at the moment in terms of renewable sources and different technology. So you've got two types of heat pumps kind of used throughout the UK. You have an air source heat pump and a ground source heat pump. In terms of heat pumps in general, they can operate to kind of minus 15 degrees. Now, how a heat pump works, an air source heat pump extracts the heat from the outside air and uses that heat to heat the property for heating and hot water. So it's like the opposite of a fridge. That's the best way to explain it in simple terms there. It does run on electricity, but because it does still have a higher output. So, for example, if you use 1 unit of electricity, you can get 3 units of heat from it, for example, potentially. So you still are generating enough heat for the property. It can lower your fuel bills. Again, with a heat pump, the main consideration tends to be your insulation is the first thing we would say about your fabric of your property. Because heat pumps do work slightly different from your more conventional technologies, they don't have as high an output as gas or oil, so it takes a bit of time for the heat pump to heat up. So you would have a heat pump on most of the day to get a gradual constant heat throughout the property. That's why insulation is important if you're incorporating a heat pump into your property. And that's purely so that heat stays in your property, because you don't want to lose all this renewable heat that you're generating. In particular, what I will also say is that's the biggest change in terms of your behaviour, is if you've got, say, an oil boiler just now, is changing from the whole putting it on for a couple of hours maybe to kind of get the property up to temperature and turning it off and then turning it back on again when you feel cold. Heat pumps work best when they're left to their own devices and left running. You can still control them with your thermostat. So if you find it too warm, you can turn it down. If it's too cold, you can turn it up. But it will provide you with a gradual constant temperature throughout the day. You can have radiator systems, or you can have underfloor heating. That's your two main ways to heat the property. We do say insulation is important, but what I would also say in particular for traditional build properties in Dumfries and Galloway, as important as insulation is, if you can't insulate every single part of the property, it doesn't mean that you can't get a heat pump. It just means there's a lot more things to consider, and that would be more about the size of heat and the distribution system. And when I say distribution system, I would mean, for example, your radiators. What you would be wanting would be a larger radiators, so that there's a bigger area covered in the property to get that heat out. So it's not always the case just because, say, for example, you can't insulate your walls, you can't have a heat pump. It then all falls down to getting the right size and the right distribution system. So that's kind of an example there of what an air source heat pump would look like. So you've got your unit on the outside, which is connected to a hot water cylinder and to a radiator system. So it's a wet central heating system. They tend to come with backup immersion heaters. The water temperature can be slightly lower, maybe about 50, 55 degrees. The immersion heater will be there for a backup if you need more water. Also, immersion heaters are there to cycle either daily or once a week, which allows the water to get up to 60, 65 degrees, which will be there for any bacteria. So it's completely good quality, still a high quality of water usage you'd be using as well there. So although it does run at lower temperatures, it will still be a good quality of water as well, because it does cycle either daily or weekly to get that temperature up to get rid of bacteria such as Legionnaires. A ground source heat pump, they work more or less on the very same principles. The only real difference is you need a lot more land to be able to do that. There's two options for that. You can either borehole it if you don't have as much land, but that is significantly more expensive. Or if you've got lots of land, the best way is trenches and coiling it out. And again, a ground source heat pump, it is, I would say, quite more expensive than an air source heat pump, but they are more efficient and you'll get a lot more heat out of a ground source heat pump. But again, most properties would be absolutely fine for an air source. Maybe larger properties would benefit for the likes of a ground source heat pump. But again, it's just something to consider. And most heat pumps will operate to minus 15 degrees, which is good to know in Scotland, although you would hope it wouldn't get anywhere near minus 15 degrees, but they can operate to kind of quite cold temperatures as well. And I'll go on to this shortly anyway, but you can benefit from all these heat technologies as the UK government's help and support on getting kind of payments for having these technologies in your property, which I'll just be moving on to shortly. The other last thing I would say about a ground source heat pump is you need a lot more storage space in the property. So because you've got the hot water tank is significantly bigger and you've got a buffer system, you just would need a wee bit extra storage there space inside your property. So the main things to take away from heat pumps would be your outside space. As long as you've got some space, you'll be fine for an air source. For a ground source, you would need a lot more land. Inside the property, you're looking for an air source, you would just be looking for somewhere to house a hot water cylinder. For a ground source, you would maybe need a wee bit more space in the property, like maybe a utility room or a garage or an outbuilding to kind of put those extra water systems in place. Again, touched on this earlier, but if you are looking to incorporate renewables into your property, it can be a bit of a minefield on what to do, when to do it. So if anyone is looking to explore those options, we do have that renewable home visit service. It's a completely free and impartial service, and it's there to help customers maybe just weigh up their options and see what would work for the property. It does kind of cover hard to treat properties as well, which are known kind of to anything that's built between 1919 or with like a historic property, or maybe something that's not connected to your mains gas network, which again is a lot of the properties in Dumfries and Galloway. So this is another useful service that you can utilise from ourselves, which is the Green Homes Network. So this is case studies of real householders. It gives you the opportunity to speak to other homeowners who have, customers of ours, who have installed renewable systems as well as insulation in their properties. And it's basically, it gives you an idea of how everything works in practice as opposed to theory. That you can do individual site visits, you can speak to them over the phone, via email. The speakers are quite, sometimes there's guest speakers in some webinars that we would do, and people are usually quite happy to be on that register. They've signed up to that and they're quite happy for you to come and look at their technologies and see how they're working in their homes. And it's a really useful tool, I feel. It will allow you to maybe speak to people that have got that and they're living on it on a day-to-day basis. And you can see kind of here on the screen, you've got quite a few in the central belt there, but then you've also got quite a few kind of Dumfries and Galloway kind of area down here as well there. But again, you can search it here for this web link here, which we can include in. It's at the very end of the slides here. We've got that saved for you. And that network of houses you can search yourself, so you can put in your postcode and how many miles you're wanting to see. It's got some short stories, and then you can request to visit that one. You can search by the type of technology you're doing or the age of the property. So if it's maybe you're wanting to see, say your property is a kind of pre-1919 property, you're wanting to see how properties like that cope with the likes of heat pumps, you can search for kind of more specific properties. You might need to broaden your mileage, but you should be able to find properties like that on the register to help you make an informed decision again. So I'll touch on now the funding options that we have to help you install all of these measures that you're wanting to do potentially. So we've got, there's 3 different ones, support that's there. So you've got your renewable heat incentive and the smart export guarantee, which are run through the UK government and via the Office for Gas and Electricity Markets. And then you've got the Scottish Government funding, which is the Home Energy Scotland interest-free loan, which does have an enhanced cashback at the moment for renewable heat generation, which I'll go over all that for you just now. So firstly, we've got the renewable heat incentive. So that is payments for any renewable heat generated at your property. So going back to the technology we discussed, they would be heat pumps, biomass, and solar thermal systems. So this is based on a heat demand of the property. That heat demand is taken from the energy performance certificate of a property, which is usually done once you've had it installed. What this allows Ofgem to do is they'll calculate this for you, and you'll get payments for 7 years for having this technology in your property and generating this renewable heat. You'll get those payments every quarter for those 7 years, and combined with your fuel savings, that could potentially pay back the installation cost of your system, or at least alleviate some of the costs of it. The renewable heat incentive is a payback, so you need to have the system installed before you can claim it, and you need to use an MCS registered product, which is why it's important to use an MCS installer also. The Smart Export Guarantee is fairly similar to what some people might remember, which is the feed-in tariff. It's slightly different, but it works very similar. Anyone that generates electricity and that's exported back to the grid, you can receive payments for. Now, the Smart Export Guarantee is based on each supplier that's on the list there. So you can shop around for an export deal like you would for your gas and electricity. So you don't need to use the same supplier. Say you don't need to use the supplier with your electricity to get the Smart Export Guarantee. You can use a completely different one. what they'll do is they'll offer you either maybe a fixed price or an element of smartness. You do need a smart meter so they can determine how much you generate, but anything you generate back to each supplier, they'll pay you for those payments. If it's a fixed price, that kind of gives you the reassurance that you're going to be getting that continuously. An element of smartness means it can fluctuate, it could go up and down in terms of a more variable rate. So that I can again help you to some of the benefits of having the likes of PV, for example, in your property. You can get some payments for having this technology in your property, and you can shop around to get the best export deal you can get there. And like I said, you don't need to be with the supplier already. You can shop around there. I know some people might want to maybe have a kind of split between them. You might not want to have one supplier for the electricity and one kind of giving you payments back. So you can split that if you wanted to. And it's just a way, again, to another sign of the help that's there for you to be to help bring the bills down, and you can make some income from it as well, potentially, which could maybe help pay back some of the costs there of installation. The final funding option is the Home Energy Scotland loan, which is administered by the Scottish Government. So this is the Scottish Government funding. This is only available for homeowners. It's not available for second homes or holiday homes. It would need to be your permanent residence that you live in. So it's an interest-free loan which offers funding of up to £38,500 available to homeowners. There is caps for each individual measure as well there. Which I've got on a breakdown further down, which I'll show you. You can do up to 15,000 for energy efficiency measures, and you can get up to 40% cash back on some of those measures, and up to 17,500 for renewable technologies, with up to 75% cash back for some of the measures as well. With that, you can also apply for a further 6,000 for energy storage. If you're, for example, I know I touched on batteries earlier, you want to install a battery in the property. This is a breakdown here of your the Home Energy Scotland loan in terms of the renewable sides of things. So you're allowed to apply for up to 2 technologies per property and a storage system. So, for example, there, in terms of the cashback element as well there, so you've got up to £10,000 you can borrow for an air source or a ground source heat pump, for example, with a 75% cash back. How that works there is you can get up to £10,000, which would get paid to installer. So you get £10,000, your contractor and installer would get paid £10,000. But when it comes to your repayments to the loan, you only pay back £2,500 from us, because 75% is deducted as a cash back. And as you can see there, it's only certain technologies that it's eligible for, and it's the ones that generate renewable heat. So that would be your solar water heating, your air source, ground source heat pumps, and biomass systems. Anything that generates electricity, it's just your interest-free loan. And the same with the battery storage, it's just your interest-free loan as well. What I would say, if you're looking to apply for the likes of the renewable heat incentive and you use the interest-free loan, you do need to clear that. So you wouldn't get the full amount of the renewable heat incentive, but you would get some of it still. So that could potentially pay off the remainder of the loan. So you would get a reduced amount paid to you over the 7 years if you were applying for both of these schemes. But you can apply to both of them, but you would get a lesser amount of the renewable heat incentive. The main differences between the two schemes is the renewable heat incentive, you need to have the technology installed before you can get any payback. The Home Energy Scotland loan allows you to install it. It's more upfront so that you can get this installed in your property. Now, to help you locate a MCS certified installer near you, we've got what's known as the Renewables Installer Finder tool. So this is where you can find accredited installers, which you would need to use if you want to apply for any of those 3 schemes that I've mentioned. You can read reviews of installers written by real customers. It has the installers info, reviews, and offers all in the one place. It's Scotland-wide, so it doesn't necessarily just need to be in Dumfries and Galloway. You can have them, for example, in kind of East South Ayrshire, maybe potentially as well, or closer to the borders. And again, it lets you do search filters, including technologies, distance, and various other ratings there for you. So it's a really handy tool to use, and it allows you to locate an MCS certified installer. And again, important part I would say for that is the fact you've got reviews written by real customers. It can just reassure you that you're maybe picking the right installer, because that can be one of the most important things I would say about any installation, even if it's not renewables, even if it's not insulation. You're always good to get the right installer to be able to install things for you. And lastly, just there, these are all the useful links that I've talked about throughout. So you've got Home Energy Scotland and the Energy Saving Trust. That's ourselves. The Energy Saving Trust oversee ourselves at Home Energy Scotland. Historic Environment Scotland are a really useful organisation, again funded by the Scottish Government to help you with more traditional built properties, and they're always coming up with new and innovative ways of insulating or putting new technologies in properties and new ways to do it. The MCS certified is where you'll find your accredited installers for renewables, and the Green Deal Orb website is the oversight and registration body for Green Deal accredited installers, which is who you would want to use for any insulation work you're doing. And the last two are the Solid Wall Insulation Guarantee Agency, where if you do have any insulation installed by an installer that's registered with the guarantee agency, they'll provide an independent 25-year guarantee. So that gives you that protection, if you like, of if you do have concerns of anything going wrong with any insulation work, you've got an independent guarantee for 25 years, which you would hope nothing would go wrong, but it's nice to know you've got that backup there for you. And lastly, the National Insulation Association is just the association of installers there. Again, it can just provide you with some more useful information and help you find some local installers in the area as well. If you do want to know more, you can contact us directly, either by visiting our website, emailing us, you can follow us on Facebook, you can call us on our free phone number. It's open Monday to Friday, 8 AM to 8 PM, and Saturdays 9 to 5. And again, the home visit service is always there as well for people who want to maybe do renewables, but they just want someone to come out and look at the property, because each property is different. That service is always there as well there. And I think that's me wrapped up there, but if anyone's got any questions there, I'll happily kind of answer them now. If there's any, I think there's been some.
Wow, thank you so much, Mary. Wow, there really was a lot there. Thank you so much. Particular thanks also to your colleague Siobhan, who's been gamely chipping away at the questions that came in through it. Important to say, I think the presentation you showed me is about 9 megabytes in size, so that's something that we could maybe share. Would you be happy with us sharing that with to attendees afterwards, or the links from it, or something like that?
That should be fine. That's not a problem.
Because I think there's a lot of links in there that could be used for worthy of it. It's really good to see Home Energy Scotland basically set up as a one-stop shop, really, into looking at increasing efficiency in a home, looking at energy generation and heat generation options. Mindful of time, picking away at a couple of questions here, which I think Siobhan has largely answered. The difference between tenants and owners, Mary's come up a bit, and the idea of I think Siobhan's asked the broader question, but can a tenant get one of the visits you mentioned, or a sort of assessment visit?
Yeah, so a tenant can still receive a visit. We do have myself and my colleague Kevin are also private sector landlord advisors, so we can help landlords as well in terms of assessing the energy efficiency of their properties to help them meet the minimum standards. So it certainly is something we can do to visit a tenant as well, and a landlord for all their properties. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. And there was a question about how to join the Green Home Network, which was answered in the chat there. So anyone else who's got a home they'd be interested in joining the Home Green Network. There's a response in the chat. Interesting question up here about, do you have to change all the radiators and things in your house? If you're currently on a gas or oil system and you're looking to change to a heat pump, does it require a complete change of radiators and things through the house?
Possibly. It really depends on the area coverage of the property. So most gas and oil boilers, radiators might not be large enough. It's not really to do with it's not to do with like the mechanics because they're bigger. It's to do with the area coverage. So it really depends on how big the radiators are. if they're quite big already in a property, like some older properties already have oversized bigger radiators because they need that. So it really depends on the area and the amount of radiators you've got in a property. So yes, but maybe not is the kind of answer. I know it's a bit of a middle one, but
maybe one of the visits will be helpful with that or something.
Yeah, it depends. It really depends on the area coverage of it. So that's what you want to get for it.
The just mindful of time, I just wanted to ask, but we're going to ask this myself actually, about biomass pellets. Seeing the price variation that's coming with biomass pellets, do you still recommend people pursue biomass with pellets when they're buying the pellets in? Because it seems like the price variation's been so massive with people buying in biomass pellets. Is you increasingly thinking if you're looking at biomass, you should look at your own source of biomass within?
Yeah, to be honest, I tend to feel as well say that biomass is a more unique technology. I would say purely that it really works for people who have got that source already, if you know what I mean, like where they maybe work for the Forestry Commission or something to do with forestry, where they can get that regular supply, or a farmer, for example. That's really where biomass works best. It's a bit harder for more domestic properties because of that. Yeah,
cool. We all know about the clever people who got in first with the feed-in tariffs and things like that. So and we've just seen the line come on the graph come down. Is that now a settled position from what you understand? Is there any going up line that's coming?
So the feed-in tariff is closed now. So the smart export guarantee is what's offered now. It's not as high as what the feed-in tariff is, but it's all down to each individual supplier that offers it. So there is an element of market kind of comparison, if you know what I mean, there, like you would do for your own suppliers, your switching supplier. Some will probably offer better deals than others. So it's really a kind of market driven now again. It's not a case of it will be very, very high. The payback for solar panels is still very low. It can take you up to 25, maybe 30 years to pay them back. But that's where I would then maybe suggest to people to get out of the mindset of thinking that how long it takes to pay back and more about how much it's going to save you on your fuel bills immediately, as opposed to how much they're going to pay for themselves eventually.
Cool. Mary, you've done a real shift there. I'm conscious I'm asking a lot of questions. Thank you so much. I'll let you pause for breath, but if you could have a perusal of the questions that have come in and any additional points for things that Siobhan, I think Siobhan's mentioned, or I'll ask Mario later on or something like that. So if you could have a perusal after, if you wouldn't mind stopping sharing your screen. I will actually, I'm mindful of time, so delighted to say we've actually got a representative of the Galloway Southern Ayrshire UNESCO Biosphere with us tonight, Jenna Keynes, and Jenna's going to bring us back a little bit to the geeky end of the scale and give her sort of reflections on what she's found geeky and maybe with a biosphere perspective. So yeah, over to you, Jenna, if you're happy.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mario. Yes, so I'm Jenna. I'm from the Galloway and Southern Ayrshire Biosphere. My task this evening was to look back at geeky, have a think about what Mario was going to talk to us about, look back at geeky and see what steps that they suggest we could make to reduce our carbon footprint at home. So when I look back at geeky, and for any of you who've done the same, there are 35 different steps that they suggest we can take, which is a little bit overwhelming. Lots of different things, a lot about our waste and recycling, some little things that I wouldn't even have thought about, like using your microwave more. So what I'm going to focus in on really is energy, how much energy we use, how to save energy, and try and think about what Mario was telling us all about and match up the steps that geeky suggest we can take. So I picked out 6. I'll fire through them because I'm aware that the time is ticking on. So the first step that I thought was really achievable was to switch to renewable energy wherever we can. So in actual fact, this is something that is very easy now to do, to switch to 100% renewable energy. There are some companies that are just using renewables. So Bulb is one, that's the one I use here on the farm. Octopus, Good Energy. So these companies, they're no more expensive than traditionally what we would have expected from our energy bills. You can switch over to them so easy, and they are using 100% renewably sourced electricity. Okay, so there's a really easy step. changing the world, they're even calling it there. So really great step to take. And if you just look, they give us a little fact there saying that we can cut your carbon footprint for energy by 90% just in that one step. So that's an excellent one to take if we can. Mario talked to us about solar panels, and I picked it out because I think it's a really interesting one. Obviously, it's an investment to fit solar panels onto your house if you already are in an older property, but I think that going forward, I think it's something that we're going to see more and more. I think, Mario, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think building or new build houses from now on, from this year on, have to have a massively reduced carbon footprint, and that will continue to go down. And I think we're going to start to see more and more solar panels installed on new build houses as part of cutting that carbon footprint of houses as we move forward into the future, which is a really good move. Boiler servicing is something that a lot of us often overlook, and obviously this applies more to people with, for example, gas boilers. But just like we service our car every year, you can service your boiler, and that keeps it running in the most efficient way possible, so it's not wasting any energy at all. And the little fact that they give us there is that you can save over 50 kilograms of carbon by making sure that your boiler is running efficiently. And it costs about 80 to 100 quid to service a boiler, which is actually a lot less than it costs to service a car. So that's a really good tip, I think. Draft proofing our house, I thought, was quite relevant. I myself am living in D&G. I'm not sure where everybody's zooming in from this evening, but I'm sure we're all around this general area. Most of us living in houses that are 100 years old or more, drafty old things, a lot of them. So just being very conscientious of drafts in your house will actually make a big difference to how much energy, how much heat is potentially being wasted or retained. And then what Geeky suggests to us really is, if you make sure that your house is nice and draft proof, would it be possible to turn your thermostat down? If we were in America, turn your heating down, I think is what they're trying to say. But realistically, if you could turn your heating down by just 1 degree, you would save about 10% on your energy bill, which is actually small change, big effect. Where we're saving on our energy bills, it means that we're not wasting energy. So we're not wasting that, so we're not creating any more carbon output that we don't absolutely need. So it's all about making sure that we're saving every inch of energy that we can. The last one there is on a very similar theme. It takes a lot of energy to heat water. It takes a lot of energy to heat air, it takes a lot of energy to heat water. So wherever we can, if possible, can we do things at a slightly lower temperature? I don't mean showering, basically dishwashers and washing machines. Most new appliances will have an eco mode now, so they will make sure that your clothes are nice and clean, but at using a lower temperature, and that means using up less energy. And just a note there on tumble dryers as well. So for every cycle that a tumble dryer goes round, it releases about 1 kilogram of carbon. So that's actually really quite a high output for an appliance. So turning down our heat a little bit, if we can, not always easy. Turning down the temperature on our appliances, definitely possible. So there's really good tips from Geeky. And then just a very quick last word from us, really. Again, not sure where everybody's zooming in from, but most of us hopefully are within the biosphere here in Galloway in Southern Ayrshire. And this is a really, it's a great place to be learning about reducing our carbon footprint, because it's an area where there's lots of community focus on climate change and resilience, and people are talking about it and people are taking actions, which is really it's quite special. So it's a great place for us to be having these discussions. And also our lovely council, our lovely D&G council, have a very ambitious goal to reduce our emissions to 0 by 2025. This is 2021, so it's quite a goal to aspire to. But once we're all working together and once we're all taking actions together, we will see these small actions grow into larger changes. And that's what we're all looking forward to. Projects like the Galloway Footsteps, for example, are a prime example of people taking action, working together to reduce our impact on the environment, reduce our carbon footprint. That's my email there. I'm going to shut up now and pass back to yourself.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenna. I think it's a nice reminder really of relating the personal actions to the bigger picture like biosphere and such as council and things. I think it's quite nice to keep that in mind. Mario, just while I prepare the last two slides, can I ask you a question about sheep's wool insulation, which is not a phrase I've ever said out loud before, but would you be able, I think a couple of people in the room would probably be quite interested in your thoughts on sheep's wool insulation. We're looking at it, seems very expensive, but good for breathability in stone buildings. I don't know, has it crossed your desk at all, Mario?
Oh, that's me now. It hasn't. We tend not to have as much technical information about them, just purely because we're not installers. But what I would say is, see, as long as it's permeable, that's the most important thing for it, as long as it's permeable. And then what you also want to check is the U value of it, which is known as the thermal performance. They're the two main factors that you can tell how good it is. So look out for thermal performance, like a U value. The closer to 0 it is, means the better it is. So you can that's how to maybe compare in terms of prices. If you see something of a U value that's closer to 0 and it's more expensive, and say something closer to a U value and it's quite cheap, and you see one that's the same but it's quite expensive, that's where you can tell the difference there, if you know what I mean, there by the price and the thermal performance.
It's quite heartening that sheep's wool is measured by a U value. I think it's rather heartening for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for that, Mario. I just want to give a couple of quick slides at the end here, just to give a snapshot about Team Galloway. So we've now got 34 members in Teams Galloway, and we're looking at actual progress in 2 months. So can you see there at the top, Team Galloway company score of 571. So above 500 is what we're aiming for. So we're on the right side of the line here. A number of achievements, you've got achievements at the bottom here, steps committed to this week, steps committed to this month. Right down at the bottom right there, 1,900 fewer items of single-use plastic are going to be required through actions that have been taken by Team Galloway. So you start to think what Geeky's trying to do is it's trying to relate us back to this bigger picture of what Team Galloway is trying to achieve. 43,000 kilograms carbon reduction commitments. So there's lovely points here about less land that will be needed for the lives that we lead and things. So if you haven't yet signed up with Team Galloway, please send me a note. I'll send you an email tomorrow morning thanking you all for attending. You can reply to that requesting to join Team Galloway. Many thanks to everyone that's already in Team Galloway. I think I've got a point here. And you can see where Team Galloway is sitting. We're all patting ourselves on the back, but we're not actually at the target. So we still need to push ourselves harder. You can see the UK average. I tried to show this slide without showing me on it, but I couldn't work out how to do that. So you can see me that is still an outlier possibly from Team Galloway, but you can see the work that we're doing with Team Galloway heavily below the UK average. Think how much lower it would be without McNabb involved, but we'll address that. And then on our way to, but not yet reaching the target. So it's quite good to put that in perspective that yes, we're making these changes. Yes, we're on the right side of the line, but we're certainly not home and dry with where we're aiming to be. And so, yeah, I wanted to just round off by saying, if you haven't yet signed up, do join us. But what we're trying to do, and we're going to be working with Geeky, I think it'd be quite interesting at the next meeting, we're going to ask Geeky to maybe talk about what actions has no one in Team Galloway committed to. And so what can we learn about maybe the Galloway-ness of this? Are there some actions that better tilt towards us than others? Is there something that we've all been able to do and something that none of us have been able to do? So it's just to try and put some flesh on the bones really of achievements to date and work going on behind the scenes. So yes, sign up for free, contact Helen or myself, full details on the Geeky website of that. So final slide here, just to say first of all, thank you so much to the speakers. I mean, Mario, that was a barrage of information, and I really think the overall takeaway point there of Home Energy Scotland positioning itself as the go-to point on this subject is a really key thing to take away, because a home assessment visit or something like that, just to kick off the relationship, do get in touch with Home Energy Scotland. Follow the Galloway Glen scheme on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I know Biosphere's on there as well. Home Energy Scotland's on there as well. Join our mailing list. You can contact Helen to join the mailing list, see our website. This leads us to the last event in the Galloway Footsteps series, 4th of August, outside the home. So it looks like we're going to have 3 speakers, hopefully, at the event on the 4th of August. We've got someone from Borders Forest Trust talking about how to increase the chances of a tree that you plant taking hold. We've got someone from the council looking at how, council's environment champion, looking at how the individual actions relate to the region's actions. And we might even have someone, a member of Team Galloway, a very well-performing member of Team Galloway, giving us a snapshot of actions they've taken and what they've found easy and what they've found hard. So we'll be advertising it through normal channels, but you'll see it come up on the events page, and Helen will be in touch. If you've attended this event, Helen will be in touch to see if you're looking to attend the next event. So I'm conscious of time. Thank you so much to everyone that's, particularly the speakers tonight. Thank you all so much for attending as well. Thanks to Jenna from Galloway Southern Ayrshire UNESCO Biosphere. Thank you to Mario and Siobhan, who's behind the scenes answering questions from Home Energy Scotland. And I think there we end the session. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And I will hope to see you in a month, on 4th of August. Thanks so much.